In a devastated world overrun by monsters emerging from mysterious portals known as the Gates, adventurers from around the globe write their own histories through epic journeys. And so begins the Age of Adventure, with Raymond, a talented young man. Together with his teammates, he is preparing for an expedition at Leith Harbor. To ensure their safety, they decide to hire 2 decoy slaves. Everyone is extremely excited for the journey. But the moment they step through the gate, before they can even familiarize themselves with the terrain, they are immediately attacked by monsters. Despite fierce resistance, the sheer number of enemies forces them to use the 2 decoy slaves right away and flee. Yet the monsters give chase and quickly take down Raymond's remaining 2 comrades. Panicking under the ferocity of the attack, Raymond can only beg for help from the slave he hired. But the slave coldly abandons him to be devoured by monsters, then proceeds to kill those same monsters himself. Who would have guessed that the slave was a regressor? He was once a great mage, the sole survivor of his party, hailed as the last adventurer, and known by the name Elpum. Despite his incredible resilience, he once faced overwhelming odds, confronting Horntail, the king of dragons. He managed to slay one of its heads, but eventually collapsed from exhaustion. At the brink of death, he wished for greater power, wished he could start all over again. When he awoke, he had returned to 6 years ago, to the moment he was still a decoy slave. And this was his second chance. After Raymond's party was wiped out, Elpum took their staff of fire arrow and a ring of telekinesis. Immediately, the remaining monsters closed in and attacked. He used fire arrow in combination with the ring's control power to wipe them out in a single move. Once the skill cooled down, he cast it a second time, completely clearing the monsters. At that moment, one surviving member of Raymond's party witnessed Elpum's power. But for the crime of sacrificing other people's lives as decoys, Elpum sent her to join her friends in death. He then returned to the Gapur Merchant Guild with the goal of shedding the slave status he bore. Now awakened to the first circle, Elpum wanted to change his contract to become an adventurer. Ebis, the executive of the guild, agreed to let him register as an F-rank adventurer. But Elpum demanded to be registered as E-rank instead, arguing that over the past 3 years he had survived hundreds of gates as a decoy slave. Ebis didn't agree right away. Instead, he gave Elpum a challenge. If Elpum could return alive from a gate that had seen 12 failed expeditions before, he would be granted E-rank adventurer status as Elpum wished. Elpum joined a group of 4 others and advanced toward the gate. They decided to set up a base in a large tree. Afterward, they split into 2 scouting teams. Elpum went with the team leader, who showed great sympathy for Elpum's past as a decoy slave and invited him to join his party permanently. But Elpum paid him no mind. That night, they regrouped at the base. After a hearty meal, the 4 of them approached Elpum as he slept. It turned out they had been eyeing the value of his staff of fire arrow all along and had laced his food with sleeping drugs. When the assassin stabbed the spot where Elpum was supposed to be lying, to their surprise, he wasn't there. Elpum, watching from a distance, immediately set the base ablaze, alerting the gate's boss monster and luring it to attack the group of 4. He'd seen through their deception. They had acted too poorly. No one would really welcome a decoy slave into a gate that had failed 12 times before. The boss, a rare and powerful gold smile, appeared. It could attack at range with an acid arrow, but Elpum noticed its skill had an unusual cooldown period. When the assassin rushed back in to attack during that window, the gold smile shot him with acid. He barely had time to react before the creature fired again, killing the remaining 3. Elpum knew that a one-circle adventurer shouldn't be able to kill it, but that was true for others. To prove his worth, this time he would show his true skill. Catching the creature off guard, he blasted one of its eyes with fire arrow. The gold smile locked onto him, launching a flurry of acid attacks. Elpum dodged, using the ring of telekinesis to control ropes and swing himself around. What magician would fight like this? He fired another fire arrow, landing a hit, then kept evading acid arrow while waiting for his skill to recover. After getting hit multiple times, the gold smile became wary of fire arrow and focused on dodging it. But it didn't expect Elpum to guide the spell mid-flight. When its nucleus was exposed, Elpum lunged in. But this was the monster's trap. It had prepared a hidden strike from behind. Elpum immediately manipulated the rope to dodge, then fired a fire arrow at the smile. The monster tried to block its weak point with its hand, forgetting that Elpum could make the arrow curve around it. The fire arrow struck its nucleus. Furious and dying, the gold smile tried to self-destruct, intending to drown Elpum in acid, but it failed. Back at the Gapur Merchant Guild, Elpum reported that he hadn't recovered the requested item from the mission. However, he had absorbed the mana stone of the gold smile and advanced to a 2-circle mage. Seeing his newfound value, the executives of the guild decided to register him straight away as a D-rank adventurer. Elpum happily accepted, since it exceeded his original request. After signing the contract, Elpum didn't hesitate to hold out his hand to borrow money from Ebis. Of course, Ebis found it hard to refuse. Elpum then went to the slave market, knowing there was someone there he wanted to recruit. A burly young man with eyes full of hatred named Debo. Though currently a slave, in the near future he would become the disciple of the polearm hero and eventually kill that very master himself. Elpum wanted to change that future, as well as see Debo's true potential. So he went to hire him. Debo demanded an outrageous price, but Elpum boldly flaunted his money, causing Debo to hurry and sign the contract. Immediately afterward, the two of them headed for a gate. Elpum tossed Debo a polearm and told him to use it in battle. When Debo asked where the other party members were, Elpum simply kicked him into the gate. Inside, monsters rushed at them, leaving Debo panicked. Elpum calmly unleashed Fire Arrow to wipe them out and mocked Debo for being so green. They moved on to where a pack of monsters was sleeping. This time Elpum ordered Debo to solo them all. Debo leapt into battle, though unused to wielding a polearm instead of a sword. But gradually he realized this weapon was longer, stronger, and much better than using a sword. Of course, Elpum knew this was exactly the kind of weapon that would make Debo incredibly powerful. Suddenly, the boss appeared and attacked them both. Elpum fired a fire arrow at the stumpy boss, but it blocked the shot. Even when he guided Fire Arrow to its blind spots, the attack was intercepted by its tangled branches. The boss counterattacked, sending both of them flying. Debo exposed an opening, but Elpum quickly used telekinetic control to pull them both away. At that point, Elpum decided he'd solo the boss while Debo had to clear the surrounding stumps. The boss again blocked Fire Arrow, but within the explosion Elpum had hidden a second fire arrow that struck its eye. Being a 2-circle adventurer, Elpum could cast 2 spells at the same time. The stumpy boss was now under fierce assault, but a horde of stumps from Debo's side rushed Elpum from behind. Elpum immediately used Fire Arrow to incinerate them, but the boss seized that opening to counterattack. Debo reacted quickly, blocking the blow in time. Elpum realized Debo was finally starting to be useful. The two of them began coordinating their assault on the boss. Debo hacked away the branches that blocked Elpum's fire arrows from hitting the boss's vital points. Enraged, the boss smashed Debo and tried to swallow him. At the last moment, Elpum used telekinesis to hurl a massive rock between Debo and the monster's mouth. He then lifted several boulders into the air with the ring of telekinesis, creating a path for Debo to climb higher. While Fire Arrow kept the boss distracted, Debo managed to get in close and landed a powerful strike in the boss's eye. The stumpy thrashed wildly, throwing Debo away, and the polearm got stuck in its eye socket. But Debo didn't give up. He lunged for the other, just as Elpum used telekinesis to send the polearm flying back into Debo's hand. Catching it midair, Debo rained blow after blow into the boss's second eye. The furious boss flung Debo away and lunged with its mouth wide open to devour him, only for 2 fire arrows to shoot straight from behind Debo and into the monster's maw. Its core shattered. The stumpy boss erupted in flames and was destroyed. It was a spectacular display of teamwork. At the Gapur Merchant Guild, Ebbies was fretting over which adventurer to invite as the guild's representative for the upcoming 100-person gate when Lord Larkin arrived. Without hesitation, Larkin decided to organize an expedition to choose the guild's representative. Elpham and Debo joined the selection event, but they drew plenty of contemptuous stares from other teams. After all, their party was made up of 2 former slaves. The prize was the chance to enter the 100-person gate, so everyone was fired up. Once inside the gate, the teams agreed to cooperate when it came to fighting the boss, but for now they split up to hunt monsters. Elpham and Debo also began encountering monsters, but since Elpham was the boss, he didn't bother fighting at all and left Debo to clear them solo. After a while, they saw the signal flare summoning everyone back. When they regrouped, Elpham immediately noticed one team was missing. That team had encountered the boss, Clown Poison Mushmom, and none had survived. This boss was notoriously difficult. Seeing that, the remaining teams decided not to risk fighting it. Instead, they planned to search for the exit gate and escape with their lives. Unfortunately, the boss was wandering right in front of the exit, making escape far from simple. At that point, Elpham proposed a deal. If each person paid him 50,000 mesos, his team would act as decoys so the others could get away. Seeing a chance to survive, they quickly agreed, though no one was carrying that much money on them. Elpham was fine with letting them pay after escaping. If he didn't make it out alive, they wouldn't owe him a thing. While the boss was busy devouring its previous victims' remains, a dessert fire arrow suddenly flew straight into its face. Enraged by its meal being interrupted, the boss charged right at Elpham. Elpham and Debo quickly retreated, drawing the boss away from the exit zone. Taking advantage of this, the other groups hurriedly activated the gate and began escaping one after another. Elpham and Debo then found themselves blocked by a swarm of mushroom monsters. Debo promptly used his new skill to cleave them down. The boss closed in on Debo's back, only to take another fire arrow to the face that made it stagger. Elpham fired again, but this time the boss dodged, forcing Elpham to guide his fire arrow to chase it while it simultaneously dodged and pursued them. The two jumped into a ravine to avoid the boss's next attack, and Elpham fired a return shot as they dropped. After scrambling out of the muddy stream at the bottom, Debo was shocked to hear that Elpham actually planned to hunt this boss with just the 2 of them. But since he'd already signed the contract, he had no choice but to risk his life. As dusk fell, Elpham stood on a cliff ledge and began firing fire arrows toward the distant boss. At the same time, he used telekinesis to spin the fire arrow into a fire lance, a piercing attack that drilled through the boss and left a gaping hole in its body. Furious, the boss charged at Elpham. He kept firing fire lances to slow it. When the boss reached the base of the cliff, Debo, lying in ambush, triggered a trap that sent it tumbling into a muddy stream. At that moment, Debo used his polearm, tied with a rope, to attack it from a distance. The boss tried to unleash its poison, but its toxin vents were now clogged with mud. Debo began channeling fire into his polearm, striking the boss's head relentlessly. The boss tried to close the distance with speed, but the swampy mud held it back. From above, Elpham fired a fire lance into the back of its neck, dealing massive damage. When Debo attacked from the swamp bank, the boss grabbed his weapon and yanked him toward it. Elpham, calm as ever, used nearby tree trunks to aid Debo. Grabbing one of the trunks, Debo kicked the boss in the head, reclaimed his polearm, and leapt to another log farther away. Elpham then used the muddy water to obscure the boss's vision and distract it. Seizing the moment, Debo swung with all his might at its neck. The boss's mushroom head was sliced clean off, leaving its body motionless. Exhausted, Debo gave Elpham a thumbs up in approval. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up too if you like it. Suddenly, Elpham froze. The boss, behind Debo, was still moving. With a furious roar, it slammed its arm into Debo's head. Elpham quickly fired fire arrows at it, but the boss dodged and began using logs in the swamp to move toward him. As it approached the cliff, it clung to the rock face and started climbing up. Debo, regaining consciousness after that blow, hurled his polearm at the boss, cutting it clean in half so its lower body fell away. But its upper body still clung stubbornly to the cliff, trying to drag itself up. Elpum then fired his flare gun at it. The boss dodged, exposing its true head embedded in its chest. That was exactly what Elpum had been waiting for. He unleashed a fire lance straight through its chest head, blowing it apart and releasing all its poisonous gas across the entire forest. Elpum used rope to haul Debo up to the top of the cliff. While the two were catching their breath and praising each other's efforts, a shadow suddenly shot past. Even with its core cracked, the boss was still trying to drag the two of them to the grave with it. Meanwhile, back at the Gapor Merchant Guild, Ebbies reported to Lord Larkin that the other teams had given up and fled the gate. Just then, the door swung open and in walked Elpum, much to both men's fascination. Lord Larkin asked Elpum if he felt confident about surviving the 100-person gate. Elpum admitted it wouldn't be easy. That was enough for Larkin to understand that it was possible. He told Elpum to name his price. Elpum coolly asked for 10 million mesos for his 2-person team. Larkin agreed, knowing full well trouble awaited inside the 100-person gate. On the day of the 100-person gate expedition, Elpum and Debo arrived to find many teams already gathering. Waiting for them was a female knight named Kiri, in charge of training squires for the Cygnus Knights. This time, the Gapor Merchant Guild had forced Elpum to work with the Cygnus Knight, sending only Elpum and Debo as their team. Representatives from other guilds also gathered at the gate. There, the gatekeeper declared that all loot would belong to the guilds, not the individuals who found it. Anyone caught trying to hide loot would have to step over his dead body. In his previous life, Elpum hadn't entered this gate, and afterwards, countless terrible things had happened. This time, he intended to uncover its secrets. Inside, they found a vast reed field. Everyone tried to stay close together, while Elpum looked like he was about to take a nap. In truth, he could feel something coming. A herd of ribbon pigs suddenly came charging in, crashing through the crowd and scattering the groups. Kiri's team ran off, soon realizing they had lost Elpum. Split up and isolated, many small groups were then ambushed by assassins who had clearly been lying in wait. Meanwhile, Elpum's group discovered a Hoblin camp. They started fighting them one by one because these monsters were extremely tough. Debo charged in from behind and swung at one Hoblin's head, but it ducked quickly. It countered with a punch, but Debo flipped behind it and smashed its mouth and leg, forcing it to its knees. As Debo tried to finish it off, it dodged again and punched him hard in the head, slamming him into a tree. The Hoblin charged to follow up, but Debo dodged and sliced off one of its arms. Instantly, it grabbed Debo's head with its remaining hand and slammed him into the ground. Debo twisted, using his legs and polearm to break its grip and escape, then drove another strike into the Hoblin's head. As usual, Elpum conserved his energy and let Debo do all the work. They continued moving and came upon the corpses of Cygnus Knights strewn across the ground. One survivor explained they had been attacked by Kiri herself. She had revealed herself as a devout follower of the Black Mage. The Black Mage was a being from 800 years ago who once threatened the world's peace. 6 heroes had sealed him away along with themselves. After that, the Black Mage's servants had scattered, hunted by Justice's alliances. Recognizing the threat, Elpum changed their mission to tracking down Kiri, and even brought the wounded Cygnus Knight along so he'd have a chance for revenge. But as Debo was helping the injured knight walk, the man suddenly pulled out a knife to stab him. At that moment, a fire arrow blew the attacker's arm off. It was Elpum, who'd been watching all along. "Another bad actor who can't fool me," Elpum muttered, finishing him off without a second thought. On Kiri's side, she had run into the group of assassins and was desperately fighting them off alone. It took her high-level skills just to bring down a single one of them. When she was in real danger, a figure suddenly dashed in and decapitated 3 of them in one sweeping move. It was Debo, appearing like a savior. The remaining assassins froze for a second in shock but quickly regained their composure and charged. Debo fought them in close quarters while dodging their ranged attacks. For a moment he was distracted and took a hit, making him freeze in place and inviting a finishing blow. But the enemy had fallen for his feint, and Debo sliced him down. Another enemy lunged to stab Debo, but Debo overpowered him with brute strength. Seeing things going badly, their leader fired a fire arrow at Debo, catching him completely by surprise. The resulting explosion made the assassins laugh in triumph. But as the smoke cleared, they saw a figure land in a dramatic superhero pose. Elpham had arrived, dragging along his four-legged friends. While the ribbon pigs he'd summoned crashed into the enemy, Elpham's team withdrew. Elpham realized the enemy's mage was much stronger than he was, probably the most powerful person in this gate. At this point, Curie wanted to give up on the gate and report to the Cygnus Knights about the followers of the Black Mage. But Elpham argued that doing so would only alert them, letting them slip away to continue their plots from the shadows. The assassins began hunting for Elpham's team in haste, only to be ambushed by Debo. He used a hoblin trap to kill one of them, then closed in on another with a knife. Debo dodged the blade, kneed the man in the gut, then dropped his own weapon to hammer him with brutal punches. Meanwhile, Curie closed the distance to the enemy sharpshooter, her face twisted with fury. Elsewhere, the enemy leader finally found Elpham and was practically gleeful at the chance for a duel between two fire mages. They exchanged spells in a fierce, rapid-fire duel. At one point, the leader managed to slip behind Elpham and unleash a powerful spell at his back, but was shocked to see Elpham completely unharmed. It turned out Elpham had spun his fire arrow around to intercept and deflect the enemy's attack. Realizing he was fighting a genuine magical genius only made the enemy leader more excited. Elpham controlled the terrain, raising rocks and earth to block attacks, and sending fire arrows chasing the enemy, forcing constant evasions. When Elpham used his spell twice, the enemy leader suddenly unleashed poison from a ring on his hand. Elpham stood frozen, dropping his staff as if paralyzed. The enemy leader grinned and approached, knife ready to finish him off. Lost in his victory, he didn't see Elpham's fist coming until it smashed into his face. Elpham followed up with a relentless combo of punches and kicks that didn't give his enemy a chance to cast a single spell. He ended it by smashing the man into a tree. He then summoned his staff back to his hand and fired a fire arrow that blew off the leader's arm. Even as the wounded mage tried to use his poison again, Elpham nullified it immediately. He knew it was a trap, meant to distract him while the enemy tried to retrieve his weapon. Just then, a surprise magical strike hit Elpham in the back before he could react. The leader had hidden another spell inside his bracelet. Elpham was blasted away by the impact. The enemy followed up with a fireball, and the massive explosion made him think the fight was over. But as the smoke cleared, Elpham emerged, battered but unbowed. This time the enemy leader wasn't surprised anymore. Realizing his current strength wasn't enough to win, Elpham pulled out a mana stone and absorbed its power. He immediately awakened to the 3-circle rank before the enemy's shocked eyes. Thinking it was some trick, the leader assassin fired 2 fire arrows. Elpham countered with just 1 fire arrow that completely nullified the enemy's spell. He then spun his fire arrow into a fire lance that pierced through the leader's fireball and obliterated him entirely. On Debo's side, after dealing with 2 of the henchmen, the Hoblin boss himself led his troops to actively hunt him down. He and Curie fought side by side, managing to wipe out a large number of Hoblins before the boss cast a spell that struck Debo, knocking him unconscious. Unable to hold out alone, Curie was forced to fight while dragging Debo away. But suddenly, Debo moved in an unconscious trance, charging through a crowd of Hoblins to reach the boss and deliver a massive strike. The boss barely managed to fire off a spell in time, blasting Debo away, but it still took a light wound. Enraged, it began firing fireballs at Curie and Debo. Just then, a fire lance came from nowhere and pierced right through the boss. Once again, Elpham arrived just in time to save his friends. They escaped the gate badly wounded. As soon as Elpham woke up, he was immediately interrogated. He had no choice but to play the role of a hapless survivor who'd barely escaped the gate because the boss was too strong. He didn't want to reveal anything about the followers of the Black Mage. As soon as he recovered, he and Kiri went off to find the snail, a pet capable of storing items, which Elpam had used to smuggle out loot from the gate. Elpam advised Kiri to be patient, explaining that the cult had already infiltrated many organizations and would inevitably make their move soon. While Debo was unconscious, he dreamed of another possible future, one where he fought side by side with his master, only to one day fall into an enemy trap and lose control. In that vision, he killed his own master and lost all reason to live. When he finally awoke from the nightmare, he went to answer the door and found Elpam there asking to borrow money. Elpam then went to the Gapur Merchant Guild and paid 2 million mesos to clear the debt that had once made him a slave. Now free, he set his price at 50 million mesos if they wanted to contract him again. Ebis thought he was insane and refused. Elpam left with Debo, heading to the slum grounds. As soon as they arrived, they walked into a brawl. A scruffy middle-aged man who was being beaten up suddenly pretended to be part of Elpam's group to avoid getting hurt. When Elpam learned the man owed money, he casually threw cash in the debt collector's face, leaving him stunned. It turned out Elpam had come to this place specifically to find this man, Ralph, and recruit him into his party. Ralph was greedy and shameless, demanding an extra 3 million mesos before he'd agree. At that moment, Baiju, the representative of the Carnia Merchant Guild, appeared. She'd learned that Elpam had survived the 100-person gate and came to recruit his team. She offered 3 million mesos up front, with a contract worth 50 million if Elpam could pass their gate conquest test. Elpam grabbed the 3 million and threw it in Ralph's face, making him grin like an idiot as he agreed to join. They then headed to the next location, where Debo reunited with the prickly Kiri. Together, they prepared to take the test to conquer the gate. Baiju was waiting for them at the gate entrance, giving them a few instructions. Elpam already knew the Carnia Merchant Guild was full of followers of the Black Mage, and since he'd cleared this gate in his previous life, everything was still going according to plan. The moment they stepped through the gate, they dropped right into the middle of a monster horde. One of the beasts pounced on Debo, pinning him down and licking his face, only to get kicked away by Ralph just in time. Elpam fired a fire arrow, beginning the cleanup. Kiri dashed forward with a skill-enhanced strike, but the monsters were way faster than she expected. They easily dodged and launched a counterattack. Kiri was sent sprawling across the ground. Then a bright light flared, and the monsters exploded. While Debo was struggling to hold off one of them, Ralph came crashing in and one-punched it to death. He was going all out, saving teammates and wiping out enemies. Because Elpam had made an offer. Whoever contributes the most in this raid gets to be the leader. Ralph could already see the fortune that title would bring. But just as he was daydreaming about his new life, Elpam kicked him across the battlefield, snapping him back to reality. Arrows rained down on the spot Ralph had just been standing. An assassin had arrived. He fired at Elpam, but Elpam used some monsters as a meat shield, then curved a fire arrow around to strike back. By the time the assassin realized Elpam wasn't hit, a fire arrow hit him from the other direction. But it wasn't over. More arrows flew, this time at Elpam's back. He was hit. Before he could recover, another arrow storm poured down on the entire group. Many were killed instantly. Survivors were trapped, monsters all around, nowhere to run. Elpam launched a fire lance, blasting a path through the beasts. The survivors sprinted. The assassin tried to pick them off mid-escape. Elpam returned fire with a fire arrow, triggering an explosion. When the smoke cleared, the assassin already had another arrow aimed at Elpam. But Elpam dodged all of them, causing doubt to creep into the assassin's mind. He quickly realized, someone's missing. The polearm guy. Too late. A fireball hit him from behind. It was a distraction play. Elpam had switched weapons with Debo. Debo celebrated the success of their trick until an arrow pierced through his gut. Another rain of arrows screamed toward the fleeing survivors. Kiri tried to carry Debo to safety, but an arrow struck her leg. They both collapsed, waiting to die. Then Ralph showed up. He grabbed them and ran. The three of them sprinted, eventually spotting the gate to the second floor. Just when they thought they were safe, a volley of arrows flew in from the front. All three took hits. Only Ralph remained standing. More arrows flew, but Elpham's polearm soared in to block the barrage. Then a massive tree trunk crashed down, smacking all three of them into the gate. The assassin clenched his jaw in frustration. His prey had slipped away. Now only Elpham remained. He and the assassin played a deadly game of cat and mouse. One exposed position equaled one incoming attack. Each movement was met with violence. Eventually, the assassin stopped hiding and taunted him. "Come fight me like a real man." Elpham approached and was immediately shot in the back. He stumbled, retreated, and fired a fireball to obscure vision. But after casting too many spells, he hit mana shock. No more casting. He chugged a mana potion and launched a volley of 6 fire arrows and a fireball. The assassin thought Elpham was panicking. The spells missed. They seemed desperate, but Elpham didn't stop. He kept burning mana, spamming spells, until the entire forest was on fire. The assassin tried to escape the blaze, but a massive rock slammed him back into the inferno. Another sniper shattered the rock with an arrow to rescue him, but Elpham was already on him, swinging his staff. The sniper tried to block with his bow, and got kicked through a tree. Elpham closed in for the kill, until arrows from the second sniper forced him to back off. They were brothers. Elpham sent a flying dagger at the older one, stopping his next shot. The younger brother rushed in with a knife. With the dagger suppressed, Elpham hurled rocks at the older one while fighting the younger in melee. He disarmed the younger one, but took an arrow to the arm. The younger grabbed his blade again and charged confidently. Elpham, now fighting with only one arm, broke the assassin's wrist. He held him and dropped a fireball at their feet, blasting him into a tree trunk. The assassin frantically searched for his brother, but Elpham was already charging at him, an arrow clutched like a dagger in his hand. Seeing that, the assassin drew his own blade, ready to fight Elpham to the death. The older brother searched frantically, only to find the younger one, badly wounded. He rushed to help, then noticed something was off. A corpse nearby, with the same arm as his brother? Game over. Elpham, wearing the younger brother's coat, stabbed him through the back. Finally alone, and utterly exhausted, Elpham collapsed to the ground. After passing through the gate to the second floor, the three remaining members of Elpham's group found themselves surrounded by corpses. Kiri realized that the Carnia Merchant Guild had used this gate to lure in and kill anyone who got in their way. Ralph politely interrupted her, pointing out that the host of this floor had just come out to greet them. He took out the necklace he wore around his neck and cast a healing spell on all three of them. It turned out Ralph was actually a bishop. So all this time, he'd been killing monsters barehanded. As soon as the boss attacked, Ralph retreated, leaving the other two to tank it. Debo managed to grab onto its teeth and landed a powerful strike on its eye. When the boss turned on Debo, Ralph intervened to block the attack. He then pulled out a spellbook and cast a buff that strengthened all three of them. After a fierce battle, they finally took the boss down. But just as they were about to leave, it rose again, now in an ice-hardened form. It became stronger and tougher, rendering their usual attacks ineffective. Ralph continued to heal the team while they focused on the greatsword strap to the boss's back. But the boss guarded its weak point fiercely. It struck Debo and stomped on him, then relentlessly attacked the other two until Kiri lost consciousness, leaving only Ralph. Debo, who had been lying still after that brutal hit, suddenly erupted with power and rejoined the fight with a predator's eyes. He dodged the boss's attacks and swung at the greatsword on its back. But the strike wasn't deep enough. The boss then used its back to crush Debo. At that moment, Ralph jumped in and healed him. Fueled by Ralph's healing support, Debo fought like a berserker, charging the boss head-on. He managed once more to get behind it and slammed his polearm with all his might into the greatsword, driving it deep enough to shatter the boss's nucleus. The boss flung Debo away with a punch. When Debo regained consciousness, he watched as the boss crumbled apart. Debo carried his teammates to shelter in a nearby cave, then went back out to search for an exit gate. A few days later, while fighting monsters, he stumbled across the body of another adventurer and found a letter on him. The letter revealed the location of the exit gate and included a request to deliver it. Debo buried the man, then led his team to the gate. But the moment they emerged from the gate, a group of assassins was waiting for them. They attacked immediately, injuring Kiri. Suddenly, a fire arrow flew out from inside the gate, killing one assassin instantly and then turning on the rest. Elpam had reappeared, like a savior. After returning, Elpam went straight to the Gapur Merchant Guild and revealed that he had completed Karnia Merchant Guild's test. At that moment, Ebis rushed to offer him 60 million mesos to sign a contract, and Elpam accepted. He also told Ebis about Karnia's crimes and their plot, adding that he had a way to wipe them out. Ebis and Elpam then went to Karnia Guild to announce they'd signed Elpam to an exclusive contract, and that Gapur would be assigning bodyguards 24/7 to his team. It was essentially a warning. Back at Debo's house, everyone celebrated the 60 million meso contract Elpam had secured. Ralph, acting smug, proclaimed that as a bishop, he was the only healer and tank in the world. He remarked that Debo and Elpam were both young monsters in their own right, but that Kiri was only basic and didn't really belong on the team. Kiri, however, pleaded to stay, explaining that her mission was to eliminate followers of the Black Mage. She promised to work harder. Elpam agreed. After all, there was about a month until the next raid, and, as he said, the best way to train is getting beat up. They went into the forest to train. Ralph and Kiri were no match for Elpam, while Debo was forced to sit in meditation, trying to master his berserk state. That night, Debo handed Elpam the letter he'd found at the gate. Elpam recognized the ring on it immediately and left without a word. He went to an alley and knocked on a door, intending to deliver the letter. They let him in but gave him 5 seconds to explain himself before they would handle him. Elpam handed over the letter and then threatened them back, warning that if he died, their leader's hideout would be exposed. At that moment, a red-eyed woman with a giant gun emerged. She was Starling, one of his former comrades from his past life. Elpam showed Starling proof that Karnia were followers of the Black Mage. He explained that he'd come to the Silent Crusade only to exchange information. Armed with what he'd learned from this visit, Elpam decided his next destination would be Nautilus. A month had passed, and the entire team was now ready to head for Nautilus. But Elpam didn't board the ship immediately. He was waiting for one more person. Iburu arrived with a new outfit Elpam had ordered for the group, though strangely, there was one extra set. When he asked about it, Elpam casually replied, "That one's yours. Put it on. We're leaving." Iburu stood frozen in confusion. The moment they arrived in Nautilus, they received the Grave of Eagle Eye mission. But they were quickly stopped by a red-haired woman. She had been eyeing this mission for a while, but wasn't allowed to take it by her captain. And since this mission was exclusive to pirates, Elpam's party technically wasn't qualified. That's when it all clicked for the group. Why Elpam had dragged Iburu here in the first place. Thanks to him, they were now officially the Iburu pirate crew. A high-ranking pirate then approached and asked Elpam for his name. Once they realized who he was, they didn't stop him from claiming the mission. His reputation had already spread far and wide. Since Elpam's party only had 5 members, he announced that only 10 slots would be available for entry into the gate. That night, Captain Chiron and her lieutenant visited Elpam in his room. They knew Elpam was an enemy of the Karnia Merchant Guild, and it seemed that Karnia had now set their sights on Menor, Chiron's second disciple. She wanted Elpam to protect Menor when they entered the gate together. In return, Elpam would receive one item of his choosing from Nautilus's treasure vault after the mission. The next day, they began the gate raid. Once inside, Elpum split from the group to take care of his own objective. Before that, he'd instructed the team to fight cooperatively, not individually. So Debo charged ahead to engage the monsters. Ralph, ever the guardian, shielded him like a father would. Kiri moved in swiftly to deliver the killing blows. With teamwork, clearing the monsters became significantly easier. Meanwhile, over in Menner's squad, one of their members was suddenly shot through by a fire arrow. Furious, Menner confronted Elpum when she realized he was the one responsible. Elpum calmly explained that he was just cleaning up and told them to stand still. Suddenly, a group of intruders, those who hadn't been authorized to enter the gate, appeared and attacked Elpum. Elpum fought back while retreating, eliminating them one by one. But Menner, misled by false information, believed he was the enemy and began pursuing him as well. Elpum used a massive explosion to separate Menner from the rest of her squad. Then, he revealed the truth. Menner turned her weapons on her own team, specifically targeting the infiltrators. Thanks to an eye patch borrowed from Starling, Elpum was able to identify those marked by the black mage. Realizing they had been exposed, the enemies struck back. Using shadow magic, they blinded Menner and fired a bullet toward her. Just in time, Elpum threw himself forward, shoving her out of the way. He used a large rock to block the incoming fire, then wiped out a number of enemies with fire arrows. But they were too many, and Elpum's mana was running dry. He planned to take Menner to the gate leading to the second floor. One enemy leapt in and dragged Menner off the flying rock, while tossing a mine at Elpum. The explosion shattered the gate to the second floor. Elpum made it through with 3 of Menner's teammates. But they couldn't kill the monsters there. They had no nucleus. Using the eye patch, Elpum discovered something was controlling them. He also saw Debo's group fighting on the far side. As his mana reached its limit and the monsters closed in, Menner reappeared to save him. She used her gun skills to create a massive explosion that blew the monsters away. Elpum asked her to stall them for a while. He was preparing to clear the gate. Taking a massive risk, Elpum consumed a monster's nucleus, converting it directly into mana. Once he was ready, he told Menner to use her cannon shot technique again. After charging up, Menner fired a massive round at the wall. Elpum then twisted the round mid-air, making it spin at high speed, drilling through the layers of walls. On Debo's side, they were slaughtering monsters non-stop, but no matter how many they killed, the creatures just kept getting back up. Worse yet, Iburu accidentally woke up the boss. Debo charged straight at it, but couldn't even scratch it. Meanwhile, Kiri was wounded while shielding him from a devastating blow. The situation seemed utterly hopeless, until suddenly, from behind a wall, a massive surge of energy burst forth like a rocket, piercing straight into the boss and crushing its nucleus. For a few stunned seconds, Debo's group just stood there in shock. As the remaining monsters around them exploded, they realized what had happened. Elpum had cleared the gate. On their way to the exit gate, they came across a corpse bound tightly to a massive boulder. It was Leah, the person Menner had been desperately searching for. Leah had discovered the Black Mage followers hidden among the Nautilus ranks, and they had silenced her for it. When they emerged from the gate, Captain Chiron was waiting for them. The entire group fell silent and emotional as Menner carried Leah's body home. Later, everyone attended Leah's funeral. But Elpum wasn't done. Using the eye patch's power, he tracked down all the Black Mage followers for Chiron on the condition that he would receive 2 items from the Nautilus treasure vault in return. The next day, Chiron and Elpum sailed together to the vault. After carefully searching, Elpum found one particular item, belonging to the enemy who had cost him so many comrades in a past life. But then, something strange happened. He noticed an odd-looking ring. As he drew near, it floated on its own and slipped onto his finger. Chiron remarked that the ring had once belonged to someone else, but now there was a problem. Elpum couldn't take it off. The following day, as Elpum's crew was preparing to leave Nautilus, Menner ran up to them. She had decided to join the team, accepting Elpum's invitation. Elpum returned to the Gapur Merchant Guild with empty hands, infuriating Ebbies. But in exchange for losing everything, he had recruited Menor into the group. She was now being hunted by the Black Mage followers, so it was only a matter of time before they made their move. Elpham then visited Starling, because Captain Chiron had told him that the owner of the ring might be there. Starling immediately recognized the ring, but she wasn't its owner. Instead, she gave Elpham a request to rescue Pier, the true owner of the ring. Elpham's crew set off for the location of the gate where Pier was trapped. They had to use a talisman to make the entrance appear. Driven by the ring on his finger, Elpham was determined to save Pier. Inside the gate, he used the eye patch to scout ahead, but what he saw was a swarm of skeletons charging toward them. The group scattered in panic. Luckily, someone triggered a trap that saved them in the nick of time. It was Pier himself. But he promptly collapsed from hunger. Once he'd eaten and recovered, Pier surprised them by refusing to leave. Instead, he asked Elpham's team to help him find the legendary Harrow's item. They used talismans to slip past skeleton hordes, navigating to places Pier couldn't reach on his own. Finally, they reached a chamber with a puzzle that needed solving to open the next door. After several failed attempts, they managed to unlock it, revealing the room that held the Harrow's item. But just as they entered, a shadow darted behind Pier and slashed at him with a dagger. Elpham reacted instantly, blocking the strike with his own weapon while shoving Pier out of harm's way. At the same time, he fired a fire arrow at their attacker, but she teleported to safety. It was Baiju, an executive member of the Carnia Guild. And she hadn't come alone. She'd brought an entire squad of assassins, now surrounding Elpham's team. While they were still wondering how the assassins had tracked them here, Elpham suddenly took a punch to the back. It turned out Ralph had betrayed them. He'd let Baiju buy him off because of his greed for money. Everyone was furious at Ralph's treachery. The two sides immediately clashed in a chaotic melee. Baiju shifted her focus to Menor. She teleported behind her and chained Menor by the neck. Just as Baiju was about to finish her off, a fire arrow from Elpham shot in to rescue Menor. Ralph clung onto Elpham, trying to restrain him, but he couldn't hold him down. Meanwhile, Pier was stabbed from behind with a sword, but fortunately, it was only a talisman decoy. Pier had used the moment to trigger a trap. The floor collapsed beneath them. Kiri quickly spotted narrow ledges in the walls and then grabbed both Menor and Debo. Debo used his polearm as a lever to fling the others into a tunnel. But as the three of them advanced through the dark passage, they accidentally triggered another trap. Metal gates slammed shut, isolating Menor and Debo. Then the walls began closing in on them. Kiri and Menor both attacked the portcullis with their skills, but it wouldn't budge. As all three began to despair, Debo used his raw strength to hold the walls apart, muscles straining with the effort. Kiri seized the chance to sprint off in search of the mechanism to disable the trap. She found a room overflowing with mana. Destroying it would disable the whole mechanism. But at that moment, her opponent emerged and attacked her from behind. If Kiri fell here, Menor and Debo would be crushed. She didn't have time to waste. Kiri forced herself to stand, activating her Rising Sun technique. The battle was brutal. She noticed the enemy's swords were all controlled by thin wires. She trapped one of the blades, yanking the enemy toward her, but it left her open, and her opponent used sword techniques to wound her severely. Mocking her weakness, her enemy taunted Kiri. Infuriated, she resolved to end the fight. The assassin sent the blades flying at her again, but this time, Kiri used Ice Blade to freeze and neutralize them. Her foe charged in with blinding sword speed, but Kiri parried every strike. Channeling both moon and sun power, she unleashed a single devastating slash that cut her enemy clean in two. She then shattered the mana core at the room's center. When she returned to Menor and Debo, the walls had stopped, they were safe. Meanwhile, Elpham and Pier were riding a conjured cloud, fleeing at full speed. The Black Mage followers closed in from behind, only to be blasted apart by Elpham's relentless fire arrows. One assassin hurled an explosive dart at Pier, but Elpham yanked him aside just in time before it detonated. They landed on the ground and were immediately swarmed by more assassins. Elpam hurled fire arrows and fireballs one after another, killing them in droves. But he was exhausted, his mana nearly spent. Still, he made the assassins hesitate, too afraid to charge him directly. Suddenly, Baiju appeared behind him, driving her dagger deep into Elpam's side. Elpam tried to respond with a fireball, but she teleported away. Seizing the moment, he grabbed Pier and fled. However, Baiju's blade had been poisoned. Though Elpam felt the venom weakening him, he forced himself to press on with Pier toward the mechanism to open the ceiling door. While Pier worked frantically to solve the puzzle, Elpam used his eye patch to see through walls, sniping assassins with precisely guided fire arrows. But as soon as Pier solved the puzzle, the mana device collapsed, and Elpam finally passed out from exhaustion. In the confusion, Ralph emerged from the shadows and grabbed Pier. Debo's group was searching desperately for Elpam when, without warning, water began flooding in from nowhere, dragging them down to the bottom of the chamber. The entire room became a rising pool. The water level was climbing fast. If they didn't do something, they'd drown in less than 30 minutes. And things only got worse. At the center of the room, a massive warrior statue suddenly came to life and started attacking them. No one realized it was Ralph's careless meddling that had triggered the trap in the first place. Elsewhere, Baiju heard the rushing water and immediately suspected something had gone wrong. At that moment, Ralph appeared, dragging the unconscious Elpam and Pier behind him like trophies. He demanded 100 million mesos for them. When the money was handed over, Ralph tossed the two limp bodies at Baiju's feet. Relief and satisfaction flooded her face. Finally, the endless trouble was over. She eagerly lunged in and slashed her dagger into Elpam's body, only to realize it was actually one of her own men, transformed by a talisman. Still reeling from shock, she didn't react in time when Ralph suddenly punched her in the face. Baiju teleported away at once, but a fire arrow was already screaming toward her. She warped again to dodge it, and the moment she landed, she knew Elpam was still able to fight. From the tunnel, a blazing fire lance shot toward her. Baiju dodged instantly, but realized too late that it had been an illusion. As she turned, a real fire arrow slammed into her back. It wasn't enough to kill her, but the whole setup had been an elaborate act by Elpam and Ralph, designed to fool everyone. Baiju cursed them both and lunged to strike, but the Elpam she cut apart was just another decoy. Other times, they were the real deal, forcing her to defend in earnest. She abruptly changed targets to the weakest-looking one, Pier. But Pier surprised her with a heavy punch that sent her flying. It turned out to be Ralph in disguise, using the talisman to fool her again. Furious, Baiju hurled a dagger and teleported behind Ralph, looping a chain around his throat and yanking tight. But Elpam appeared, slicing the chain apart with a dagger, leaving Baiju seething with rage. They pressed her hard, landing more and more blows. Just then, the whole room shook violently. Water flooded in even faster, threatening to sweep them all away. Ralph grabbed onto a stone pillar for support, but Baiju launched at him in a blur, slashing him multiple times. She rebounded off the pillar and drove her dagger straight through Ralph's back, pushing him into the rising torrent. Underwater, the two of them continued their deadly fight. Ralph coughed up blood, poisoned from Baiju's dagger. She darted in to stab him again, but Ralph grabbed the dagger barehanded and held it in place, grinning. He pulled out a silver cross and cast a spell, neutralizing Baiju's poison entirely. Baiju teleported behind him to strike, but her dagger bounced off a magic barrier surrounding Ralph. He swung a heavy punch that missed, but his hand clamped onto Baiju's chest. Enraged, Baiju teleported away instantly. But Ralph had seen it. The thing she wore openly at her chest was the teleportation artifact. He lunged in to attack. Baiju tried to teleport again, but Ralph had her movements read perfectly now, pummeling her with blow after blow. In desperation, Baiju used the dagger's explosive skill to shatter Ralph's barrier. She prepared to deliver the killing blow, but a fire arrow from Elpam flew in, severing her arm at the shoulder. Elpam wouldn't let her finish Ralph. Ralph landed another crushing punch that sent Baiju crashing into the wall. Her teleportation artifact shattered, cutting off her escape. But Baiju wasn't done. She rushed Elpam in a frenzy. He countered with a fire lance, cracking her dagger and ruining its special skills. Her remaining arm was sliced away in the blast. Driven to utter desperation, Baiju bit down on the dagger with her teeth and charged at Elpam one last time. But Elpam still had mana left. He launched another fire lance straight at her. In the roaring blaze, Baiju's eyes widened. In that final moment, she saw the image of her master in the flames. And she smiled with grim satisfaction as everything went dark. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next part.